You know, the recent series finale of 2020 got me thinking about series finales. More specifically, Futurama's series finale. Even more specifically, the fact that Futurama had 4 series finales. One of the strange byproducts of Futurama's on-again, off-again relationship to our television screens was that the writing staff could never be certain if any given season would be the last. In fact, Fox never even formally canceled the series back in the early 2000s, they just didn't renew them for a 5th production cycle. Then, when the show returned in straight-to-DVD movie form, and later for 2 production cycles on Comedy Central, the fate of the show's renewal was equally ambiguous. Fortunately, the writers stayed on their toes since they did not want Futurama to end with a fizzle, and always sought to give the series some sense of closure when the production cycle would end, just in case. And this vigilance is why Futurama actually had 4 different episodes that were written and produced as possible series finales. That's right, 4 series finales. The 4 episodes in question are The Devil's Hands Are Idle Playthings, Into the Wild Green Yonder, Over Clockwise, and of course, Meanwhile, which would end up being the actual series finale. All of these episodes tackled giving the series a bit of closure in a different way, but which of them did it best? Today, let's talk about all of Futurama's series finales and determine which one is the Futurama series finale to rule them all. Before we get into this finalysis, I would super appreciate it if y'all subscribe to my channel. I post a ton of Futurama content and it looks like only a teeny tiny fraction of my viewers are actually subscribed. I know my videos probably keep popping up in your feed, so it doesn't make much of a difference to you, but it makes a huge difference to me and how my channel performs on YouTube. So if you've liked my Futurama videos, I would seriously appreciate it if you just click that subscribe button and keep tuning in. Subscribe. Thanks y'all, I appreciate you. Alright, so when looking at these 4 series finales, in the end we're going to assess them 2 different ways. Which is the best episode and which is the best finale, because these are distinct things. So I'm going to briefly run down the premise of each ep with select commentary, and then talk about what finale elements were included. First up, The Devil's Hands Are Idle Playthings. The staff tasked series vet Ken Keeler to pen this finale, and the episode heavily focuses on Fry and Leela's will they won't they relationship. The episode follows up another classic, Parasites Lost, which showed Fry and Leela get together after parasitic worms actually improved Fry as a person. Specifically, this follows up how Fry learned to play the holophoner for Leela.
Remember when I had those stomach worms that made me smart? I could play the holophoner, and it made Leela like me.
When Fry shows little to no hope in holophoning, Bender suggests he metaphorically make a deal with the devil.
And by devil, I mean robot devil. And by metaphorically, I mean get your coat.
The sequence in Robot Hell is really well executed. Fry basically agrees to switch his own hands with another random robot to be decided by this giant wheel of fate. There are a ton of visual hints and cues leading the viewer to believe that the switch is going to end up being with Bender. The way the robot devil says,
"Probably one you've never even met,"
followed by Bender rubbing his hands together. As the wheel spins, they specifically show Bender waving his own hands around, and of course, the wheel nearly lands on Bender before jumping over to the robot devil. It's just good visual storytelling. The robot devil's hands make Fry an incredible musician, and Hedonism Bot asks him to write an opera, and Fry agrees with one important term.
If I can make it about Leela.
Me? Really?
But of course, the episode wouldn't have a deal with the devil without a devious plan. First, the robot devil gets Bender to trade him his shiny metal ass for a big blowhorn. Next, Bender uses that blowhorn on Leela, temporarily making her deaf.
What? Are you talking?
Leela doesn't want Fry to know she can't hear his opera, trying to fake her way through the first act, but at intermission, she too ends up making a deal with the robot devil. She trades one of her hands for the ability to hear.
I can hear! I can hear like a safecracker!
So with Leela now able to hear Fry's opera, the robot devil springs his trap. He interrupts the show with a line that is used all the time in YouTube video essays, and rightfully so.
"You can't just have your characters announce how they feel. That makes me feel angry."
That line makes me feel happy. But the big twist is all revealed as the scripted opera turns into an ad-libbed performance by all of our major players.
I agreed that I'd give him my hand.
In marriage.
So the robot devil tricks Leela into giving him her hand in marriage, and Fry has a decision to make, the ultimate catch-22. He can keep his hands so that he can keep playing the music that will make Leela fall in love with him, but Leela would be trapped in Robot Hell with the robot devil, or he can save Leela by giving up his hands and his ability to make beautiful music. Fry obviously makes the only choice he can here, and unfortunately his holophoner skills left with his hands.
Your music's bad and you should feel bad.
But the final sequence is pretty much perfect. Leela asks Fry to keep playing.
Please don't stop playing, Fry. I want to hear how it ends.
I really love this last shot. The music is beautiful. It's not particularly impressive as a composition, but it's sweet and emotional. In Fry's final performance, Fry and Leela kiss, hold hands, and walk off into the distance together. So as far as finales go, I think this does a pretty damn great job. The episode is funny and true to Futurama as a series. It has a pretty fun and out there premise with great twists and turns. I suppose the premise is maybe a little more existential than it is sci-fi, but I think Futurama has always walked that line pretty well. Fry and Leela's relationship was definitely the biggest through line in the series that didn't have much of a resolution. It's also probably the biggest emotional aspect of the series that fans were invested in up to this point. With episodes like the aforementioned Parasites Lost, Time Keeps on Slippin', and Why of Fry, all leaving us with bittersweet Fry and Leela endings. This one keeps that tradition alive, but maybe a bit on the sweeter side. If this had been the very last episode of the show, we would have been left with a very optimistic ending in regards to Fry and Leela's relationship. It left the show with the implication that Fry and Leela would one day be together, but didn't give a definitive answer in case the show was renewed. Personally, I don't mind the bittersweet ending. It leaves you with a bit more to chew on and think about than a definitive ending might. We also get to see a handful of fan favorite characters at the opera, and my personal favorite aspect, major roles for both the Robot Devil and Hedonism Bot, possibly my two favorite robots in the show. The truth is, though I desperately wanted more Futurama back when this actually was the series finale, this was a very emotionally satisfying way to end the show. It's rare that the final episode of a series is one of its best, but I think this is probably a top 5 episode. If there had never been another episode of Futurama, I would have been very pleased with this ending. But as we know, this wasn't actually the end of Futurama. The show would be revived in the form of 4 straight-to-DVD movies. These movies released from 2007 to 2009, and as with The Devil's Hands Are Idle Playthings, the final film was written as though it could possibly be the final time we see the Futurama crew in action. This last movie was called Into the Wild Green Yonder, and they once again tasked Ken Keeler to write the script. Now this is definitely the most unique of all of Futurama's series finales, as it's an entire movie the length of 4 regular Futurama episodes. This is definitely the Futurama finale with the biggest stakes, as it all culminates in a final sequence with universal implications. Rather than break down this entire movie, I'll give you a very abridged version of the story. Basically, thanks to an explosive accident, Fry is gifted the ability to read other people's thoughts, but as the series previously established, Fry's lack of a delta brainwave prevents other people who can read minds from being able to read his mind. Because of this, a secret society of tinfoil hat-wearing madfellows tasks Fry with a very important quest. He must stop an ancient alien race known as the Dark Ones from destroying another ancient alien race known as the Encyclopods. He's the only one who can do this because the Dark Ones can read thoughts and would be aware of any plot to destroy them unless Fry is the one with that plan. At the same time, Leela has become a protester and activist that's trying to protect a violet dwarf star from being destroyed by Leo Wong. The two stories converge when Fry learns that the violet dwarf star is actually an egg containing the Encyclopod he's tasked to protect, with Leela falsely believing that Fry is on Team Wong, trying to destroy the dwarf star. Basically, Fry can't risk the Dark One discovering his plan, so he can't tell Leela that he's trying to protect the violet dwarf star. Man, this story is a little bit sweaty, that's a lot of setup. But the important part about the ending is that we get a really nice moment here between Fry and Leela. Leela has been told the entire episode that she cannot trust Fry, while Fry keeps asking her to trust him. But she realizes that regardless of how bad it looks, she knows she can trust Fry's intentions.
You're you. That's all I need to know.
After a big dramatic ending involving the Encyclopods, the crew flees Zap Brannigan in the Planet Express ship. There are some really great last moments in this final scene.
There were so many things I wanted to say to you.
Like what?
Like, this is not the end, but mostly just, I love you, Leela.
And of course, Leela finally reciprocates, though it is interrupted.
I love you too. Wormhole!
But I think my favorite is that the crew, uncertain of their future, embraces the unknown.
Into the breach, meatbags.
A perfect metaphor for the state of the series at this point. And of course, Fry and Leela kiss before flying into the wormhole, triggering a graphic that mirrors the opening credits. So does this episode work as a finale? Well, it's a weird question. The movie is jam-packed. There are so many stories in here. They do give a lot of character screen time. Bender has a subplot, Leela has an important story, and of course, Fry is the main focus. The episode calls back to Fry's delta brainwave and Fry and Leela's relationship, two important through lines for Futurama fans. But all of this stuff feels almost secondary to a lot of the stories in the movie. There's an entire episode spent on a poker tournament. Another heavily features a prison break. The second prison break in these Futurama movies, might I add, but it was nice to see them do such a variety of things with their potentially final adventure. The final sequence near the Violet Dwarf Star also jam-packs pretty much every character that's ever been in Futurama into the crowd. A nice little visual to showcase just how far the show has come. This movie also followed up the weird little waterfall family through line for the series, which some people might not even be aware of. Basically, in this movie and 3 other episodes of the show, we meet members of the Waterfall family, who are often some sort of activists. At the end of each of their episodes, they tragically die, and 2 of those times, a new family member has appeared to promise to avenge their death.
Great-grandpa, no!
The movie brought that story to a close by killing both Frida Waterfall and Hutch Waterfall and having Hutch's DNA be saved by the Encyclopod. A fun little connection for the fans who really dig the weird little pieces of continuity the series had to offer. The end of the movie also features a big climactic countdown, which was a small callback to the pilot, which also featured a couple prominent countdowns when Fry is frozen and at the end of the episode. Personally, I think the final moments are what really makes the episode work as a finale, even if they feel a bit disconnected from the rest of the movie. The final moments between Fry and Leela, the crew accepting their uncertain fate, and the book-ended blue Futurama graphic really did it for me. So even though I don't think this episode was quite as good as the previous finale, I think it offered a pretty satisfying ending. Once again uncertain, but maybe a little more certain than the last time. And once again, leaves you with something to think about. But as we know, this was not the series finale again.
Yeah, we're back.
The show would be revived on Comedy Central, initially for 26 episodes that would span 2 broadcast seasons. So, once again, when they reached the end of this production cycle, they wrote a potential series finale, this time called Clockwise. And you know who wrote it? Ken Keeler, baby! This episode showed Kubert help Bender overclock his own processor and basically become a robot god. But because Kubert broke the terms of service for their bending unit, he and the professor are sued by Mom, putting Planet Express at risk of going out of business. I love their sign when they're going out of business forever again. A fun nod to the fact that this is in fact the 3rd time they'd written a series finale. Once the company is in danger, Leela decides that it's time to pack it up and move on with their life, leaving Fry without the 2 most important people to him, since Bender had sort of ascended to his new godlike form. In the end, Bender returns to save the day with a fun little twist. He convinces the prosecution to drop the charges on Kubert on account of him being a minor. But because Kubert is a clone of the professor, he too is acquitted thanks to double jeopardy.
What a brilliant legal shenanigan. Case dismissed.
At the end of the episode, Leela returns to Planet Express, and the episode gives us one of those classic pull at the heartstrings endings it's known for. Before Bender underclocked himself, he made sure to keep a bunch of answers to life's many questions, including the ultimate fate of Fry and Leela. We don't get to read it, but we do get to see Fry and Leela's reaction to it. There's a range of emotions, but the last one is the most important. This episode has a lot to like and is definitely one of the better entries in the revival seasons, but the question is, was it a good series finale? Well, it had some really funny gags at Zoidberg's expense.
Quick, Zoidberg, take 3 steps to your right.
Which is pretty classic Futurama. It had a fun sci-fi premise with Bender's overclocking, which led to some really gorgeous sequences that I love to look at. The court case showed off a good mix of random characters from across Futurama's history and the jury, and it of course had that all-important Fry and Leela-centric ending. By this finale, I was pretty damn impressed that they managed to continue to give us a little bit more finality to Fry and Leela's relationship without outright giving us the answer. 3 finales in a row, they walked that line perfectly. Really impressive stuff, and the execution of this moment was honestly one of the most effective of any finale. Such a smart way to show us but not tell us that Fry and Leela are destined for each other, leaving the show open for more, but again, a satisfying ending if this was actually the end. But of course, it actually was not the end again. The show got renewed for one final production cycle at Comedy Central, so 26 episodes later, the real, actual, factual series finale aired. The episode was called Meanwhile, and I'll give you 3 guesses who wrote it. That's right, Ken motherfucking Keeler, the king of series finales. After Leela has a near-death experience at Luna Park, Fry decides that he officially cannot live without her and decides to propose. This episode also gives us another great sci-fi premise. The professor creates a button that rewinds time 10 seconds.
Couldn't you go back in time as far as you want by pressing the button over and over?
Oh, Leela. Poor Leela.
Each time the button sends you back 10 seconds, it takes 10 seconds to recharge.
Fry uses the time rewind button to get Leela a very nice engagement ring and tells her to meet him at the Vampire State Building at sundown if she accepts his proposal. When she doesn't arrive, he expects the worst and jumps off the tower, not wanting to live without Leela's love. But, classic Fry, his watch was wrong from all the time rewinding he did. As he approaches the ground, he sees Leela coming to meet him, and he presses the button in an attempt to jump back to the top of the building. Unfortunately, he had been falling for over 10 seconds and just keeps prolonging the inevitable. Thanks to some time shelter shenanigans, the professor figures out what is happening and the crew slowly makes their way to try and help Fry. But when Leela presses the button after the professor leaves the time shelter, he is, as he himself put it,
shredded across the time-space continuum like human coleslaw.
The crew manages to buffer Fry's fall and prevent another horrific death, but as Fry lands, he destroys the button, freezing the entire universe in that one single moment, except for him him and Leela. The two of them end up living out their entire lives together. They have a wedding, they travel the world, and they grow old together. In the end, the professor finds his way back to Fry and Leela, and then he manages to find a way for all of them to get back to their lives.
You mean we'll all get to live our lives over again?
But there's one caveat. They won't remember what happened.
What do you say? Want to go around again?
I do.
So does Meanwhile work as a series finale? To me, the answer is emphatically yes. It gives us an absolutely top-notch sci-fi premise with this time button. In fact, the premise was so great that Rick and Morty stole it and then won an Emmy for it. An Emmy that rightfully belongs to BoJack Horseman, but that's another story. But this time, the focus on Fry and Leela's relationship was much more definitive and tugged at the heartstrings for most of the episode. In fact, I think the entire world freezing around them is kind of a perfect send-off to Futurama. For the final episode, the world of tomorrow that we know and love was frozen in place. For a few glorious minutes, we got a perfect snapshot of the world that we spent 140 episodes growing attached to. We could see what all of our favorite side characters were doing as a part of their everyday routine. We could appreciate the intricacies and details of the world this team had built. And through it all, we got an incredible, emotionally satisfying ending for Fry and Leela. One that built on the previous finales while giving us something new to appreciate. And depending on how you interpret the final sequence with the professor, you could argue that by going back, these characters we know and love are going to continue to experience the entirety of this incredible series over and over again. A beautiful end to a beautiful series. So which series finale was the best series finale? Well, I think if you're asking me which of the 4 series finales is my favorite episode, the answer is The Devil's Hands Are Idle Playthings. That's just genuinely one of my favorite stories ever told in Futurama, finale or not. But if you're asking me which episode is the best series finale, the answer is Meanwhile, our true finale. For all the reasons I listed previously, it just works too perfectly as a true send-off to the show. I think it helps that the crew fully expected it to truly be their last episode, whereas they always had hope for a renewal with the other finales. Into the Wild Green Yonder has a satisfying ending, but overall the movie is a bit overstuffed, and things that make it a great finale feel disconnected from the rest of the plot. Clockwise has a similar issue. It gives us that beautiful Fry and Leela ending, but it also doesn't feel particularly tied to the story of the rest of the episode. Plus, it didn't really sit right with me that the series finale would sideline Leela like that. She was gone from the story for a huge chunk of the episode. And while Devil's Hands might be my favorite episode of the bunch, it doesn't celebrate Futurama as a series quite like Meanwhile does. Okay, this is kind of morbid, but I also noticed that in Into the Wild Green Yonder, Fry is willing to sacrifice himself thinking he's the Dark One. In Clockwise, he willingly floats over Niagara Falls, and in Meanwhile, he jumps off the Vampire State Building. Dude nearly kills himself in 3 of 4 finales. For a series finale, this seems like an extra risky strategy.
Did you say extra crispy recipe?
So if I were to rank them in terms of episode quality, it goes 4, Into the Wild Green Yonder, 3, Clockwise, 2, Meanwhile, and 1, The Devil's Hands Are Idle Playthings. But my ranking in terms of how well they function as a series finale, it goes 4, Clockwise, 3, Into the Wild Green Yonder, 2, The Devil's Hands Are Idle Playthings, and number 1, Meanwhile. I gotta say, series finales can be hard. There are tons of hugely popular series out there that did not deliver satisfying endings for their audience, and many that are well received still don't quite satisfy their entire fan base. Some shows don't even get to properly end their show, but I don't think I've heard of a single person who doesn't love Meanwhile. It's just everything you can want and more out of a series finale. For a lot of Futurama fans, the revival seasons were a bit uneven, and the consistency we were used to for so many years seemed to wane. But to be rewarded with a finale of this caliber is genuinely one of the most satisfying things I've ever experienced in fandom. In fact, my very first Futurama video last year was a video about the late Philip J. Fry that I titled Futurama's Final Masterpiece. I might have to rescind that title because after rewatching Meanwhile, I think I have to admit that Futurama's swan song was in fact their true final masterpiece. Folks, thanks for tuning in to another Futurama breakdown. This ended up being way longer than I anticipated, but hey, I sure do love talking about Futurama. You know the drill, stay tuned, and I'll catch you next time.
Johnny! Futurama!